Thank you for joining this latest episode of Cardinal Control Room. I'm Nathan Wilson, the moderator for this episode. Before we jump into the interview, we want to give a quick update. On September 23rd, we did the original interview. On September 24th, a tentative agreement was unveiled. On September 28th at 12:01 Pacific Standard Time, the strike ended, allowing writers to go back to work after 148 days. On October 2nd, the WGA sent out ballots to ratify. The voting ends October 9th, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We wanted to give you some of the biggest wins according to Verge and Polygon after going through the updated contract. Number one, minimum pay bumps for the writers' room minimums. Staff writers and Article 14 writers, which are story editors and executive story producers, will see increases in their basic weekly wages for the next 3 years. 5% in the first year, 4% in the second, and 3.5% in the third. Going forward, at least 3 writers must be hired for shows consisting of 6 episodes or fewer. If a season has between 7 and 12 episodes, 5 staff writers must be hired. And for shows with more than 13 episodes, that number jumps to 6. At all sizes, at least 3 of the writers in the show's room must also be writer-producers. There are also some regulations on AI. Inside the contract, it says the technology cannot be used to write or rewrite or produce original source material. The new contract also prevents the use of writers to train AI, which forces writers to undermine their own role. The third biggest takeaway was streamer transparency and residuals. While the new rules don't require streamers like Netflix to disclose the numbers to the public, they will provide the total number of hours streamed domestically and internationally for self-produced, high-budget streaming programs. With transparency comes viewership-based residuals. So writers will finally see some residuals coming from streaming services. Those are the biggest takeaways that we have from the new contract. We want to thank you for watching this newest episode. Let's get into it. I want to thank you for joining us as we discuss the strike that's been underway since May 2nd between the AMPTP, WGA, SAG-AFTRA, DGA, IATSE, and other film and television unions. I'm joined today by 3 great individuals who have different roles they play in the filmmaking space. I'm going to go ahead and have them introduce themselves one at a time. So I'm going to start with Dan Edwards.
Thanks. My name is Dan, and I'm a colorist here in Los Angeles.
All right. Thanks, Dan. And next we have Scott.
Hey, I'm Scott. I'm a TV producer here in Los Angeles.
All right. And finally, we have Alex.
My name is Alex Gracie. I'm a member of IATSE Local 728, and I'm a lighting programmer here in Los Angeles.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So this strike officially started on May 2nd when the Writers Guild and the talks between them and the Alliance of Motion, Picture, and Television Producers, AMPTP, broke down, and the WGA kind of slammed them in the studios for what they believed was creating more of a gig economy in which they moved from full-time to freelance writing positions. Do you guys believe that the WGA, what they were feeling, is valid, and kind of the steps that they've taken since then makes sense?
I would say absolutely. And I think what the WGA is feeling is honestly what it's kind of a microcosm of what's happening in our economy as a whole. If you look at the rise of gig economy and other gig workers with like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Lyft, you name it, labor is becoming more of like a commodity. And it's really great to see, some unification, and especially with the UAW strike happening as well. We're starting to see labor be a competitive market force, and the more unity we can get behind that, I think the better.
Yeah, I mean, there's other issues as well. I mean, are we going to talk about like AI and all that stuff as well? Or okay, yeah. Cool, yeah. But as far as like, yeah, what the WGA is asking for is, certainly reasonable. It's very reasonable, and it's not outside the realm of doing, you know, like they've, you know, the studios have a lot of money. They've got record profits, you know, year after year, especially in the pandemic. And it's kind of their fault for a lot of this, especially like, you know, with Netflix, you know, having a business model that is unsustainable. You know, they've kind of made their own bed, and now they're kind of trying not to sleep in it. So unfortunately, you know, for them, there's a lot of people out there that do a lot of work for them, and they need to be compensated. And, you know, so I think the strike is more than justified.
Alex.
You know, I'm always going to side with the workers on this one. Yeah, absolutely. I think the asks that the writers first and then SAG-AFTRA made afterwards are both incredibly valid. I think we've seen all of these collected companies that represent that the AMPTP represents have lost 4, 5, 6 times as much money as the writers were offered, as much as the writers deal would cost them. So I don't necessarily think it's about the money for these big companies. I think it's about keeping workers in place. And so in terms of like turning it into a gig economy, which was your question, the third sticking point that the writers are having is that writers' rooms are getting smaller, and so they're interested in a writers' room minimum. And so I think this is something that they will be willing to compromise with. They're in the rooms this previous week. They'll be in the rooms this coming week, but that is something that is a point of contention with them, is that they want to make sure that if a writer's room needs 10 people, there's 10 people in it. And we're often finding writers' rooms shrinking. And so one of these points that they're trying to make is that.
Okay, and Scott kind of brought it up. Artificial intelligence, AI, in the writer's room. Do you believe in any way that artificial intelligence could replace a writer? I'm not saying that I feel this way, but I know that the studios feel this way. And, you know, what is your take on them thinking that that's even possible?
It even goes beyond that, though, because now there's technology. I mean, AI is insane, right? So it's like, now you can, I know there's articles about it. I've seen the technology myself, but you can, you know, ingest a certain amount of somebody's voice, you know, they read a script, you know, they read, you know, a couple pages, and then you can type in a prompt, and then all of a sudden you have the voiceover for, you know, what you're doing. Right. Essentially getting rid of voiceover. So the thing is that, like, I mean, heck, you're seeing it in schools. Like a good friend of mine, his son got suspended for using ChatGPT to write a science paper. You know, it's like AI is getting to a point, like, I think this is a preemptive strike, because like it's just on the precipice of being good enough to like actually legitimately appraise. I mean, some of the stuff that you watch on TV does feel like it's already written by AI, honestly. So I think, you know, it is a real danger. It's not just replacing writers, but it could replace a lot of other, you know, things. You could, you know, getting rid of voiceover, getting rid of, you know, this and that. So I think it's even more important. It's even bigger than just replacing writers, but it could, and it might have already in some cases.
And there's also using artificial intelligence or just capturing someone, background actors, for instance, capturing them one time, and then you can use them forever. So it's not, like you're saying, it's not just the writers that they're kind of going after, it's actors. It's kind of evolving into where they could try and do everyone. I know that The Lion King, the remake of The Lion King, was all done in VR. So you didn't really have full-on lighting crews that were working on that, or camera crews that were working on that, or any kind of crews. It was kind of more of a, let's try this out and see where it goes. So do you guys see that happening with AI? The studios are just, we're just trying this out and seeing how we can use it in the future.
Well, if there's anything that can be used, it can be leveraged as like a cost-saving measure. They're obviously always going to do it. But, you know, I do wonder, the AI models are only as good as the data that's like fed into them. So at what point, you know, we keep feeding things into the AI model, you know, it's just like a huge like degradation in quality. I mean, if you don't have that human element and everything, then what's the point in making any of this? You know, I could see like simple scripts or voiceovers being written by that, but what would be the intentions? you know, Scott, I feel like you had more
well,
articulate opinions on it.
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking off that, what I think is funny, or what I noticed, do you guys remember? It was recent. It was earlier this year, I think, where it kind of became in vogue to use the AI like artist websites. I can't quite remember what they're called. I can't quite remember. If you remember, let me know. But what's hilarious is you could literally type in anything in there, and yet somehow everybody still came up with the same spaceman, it like floating in space. Like it still came out all the same. It was still it's so bad. I don't know, but I think what I did want to say is that like the AI thing is really difficult because it's got a lot of nuance, right? So like AI itself can be used in some ways that are like, you know, helpful and not creative, right? So like, for instance, on my last show, we had some really bad audio. It was a hidden camera show, so like they had audio hidden in like the toaster oven and like, you know, here and there, and it was all reverby bad. It was low. And one of our editors was like, you know, like traditional filters, we're running through this stuff in Avid, like it's not working. And he's like, well, I don't want to be the guy that says it, but I've got this AI program that we can run it through and clean up the audio. And lo and behold, it sounded amazing. So all of a sudden, the worst degraded audio was actually usable. And it's like, that's not quite a creative thing, right? That AI didn't write anything. It didn't replace anything, but it just made things better. So I do feel like, you know, there's a certain level. Now, how do you regulate it? How do you that it's going to be very difficult. And I think that might be one of the sticking points with these talks is like, you know, obviously they've banned ChatGPT in school, but they have a program to detect it. So it's like, are they going to make these companies like, do we have to run everything through a program? Is there like, you know, AI police? You know, I don't know. I think that's going to be very difficult to be able to actually police the use of it.
Alex, do you have any thoughts on AI?
Absolutely. I mean, the implications of it are kind of overwhelming. And I also think it's important to notice that, like, yeah, a lot of AI kind of is not great right now. But like, if we're talking about like video games, for example, we are looking at like Pong of AI. You know what I mean? Like in 10 years, it's going to be rapidly different than it is now. But in terms of the implications for how it affects people in my line of work, like you guys were mentioning, it's more so about how it affects SAG-AFTRA for me than how it affects the WGA. Because if they can eliminate background actors, I mean, that is like, you're eliminating costumers, you're eliminating makeup artists, you're eliminating set lighting and grip. You're eliminating tons of people from the production department because, I mean, your second almost entirely deals with background. You've got PAs that also just deal almost entirely with background. This affects your caterers. I mean, it's an industry-wide thing. And I understand why the companies that are represented by the AMPTP are chomping at the bit because they can see the bottom line and the implications this makes. But part of the reason that organized labor exists is so that we can have a say in this discussion. And like, you know, if there's no other alternative and we can't get a clean pass on the audio, but we can do it with AI, you know, if that doesn't break the terms of the agreement, I think that should be done. But in terms of taking a human being who gets paid, you know, it depends show to show, but like $150 a day minimum wage for an 8 to 10 hour day, and then they are never paid by that company again, and their likeness is stolen from them, I think is criminal. And I think if WGA and SAG-AFTRA does not get that point, we're going to look back on this point in history and see that it's the cause of a very different film industry.
Yeah, I think we're kind of running into the where does saving money on our production, how do you still feel good with it taking over someone else's life as opposed to you having to feed a couple extra mouths, you know, and making it an exclusive club of only a certain amount of people get to work on this stuff from now on. So we'll kind of move to more of what's happening now. So have any of you guys joined the picket lines that have been going on, and what have you, you know, if you've joined them, what have you done with them? What have you seen while you've been out there?
I'm gonna jump in on this one if that's all right with you two. Yeah, I'm doing I call it the Strike Line bike tour. I'm trying to ride my e-bicycle to all of the strike lines. I live in the San Fernando Valley, and so the Fox lot and the Sony lot are they're giving me some trouble. I'm probably gonna have to include the LA Metro involved in that, but so I've been out to almost all of them at this point, and they also are doing like a lot of like solidarity events where they're like inviting members of the IA and members of any local and union out to them. And they're super fun, they're super great, especially if you're like dealing with a lot of the repercussions of the strike as an IA member. Like a lot of us have seen our workload cut down to probably about 10%. Some people more, some people less, but I really can't recommend going out to a strike line any more than I possibly could. It's fun to walk the lines with the people that you're in the struggle with, because like SAG-AFTRA's struggle is my struggle and the WGA's struggle is my struggle. Like, my contract is not going to change at all, but their contract does affect my contract. And IATSE members are up for negotiations in about a year and a half. And so if they're able to bring home, victories on these three big sticking points that they're in, it's going to be a lot easier for us to go to the table and say, hey, look, the writers threw a wrench in the cogs of the machine and they got what they wanted. We can do the exact same, or we can just find some middle ground here for a perfectly reasonable offer. But strike lines are super fun. Can't recommend it anymore. If you're deciding between like staying home and watching something on streaming or firing up the Xbox, like nothing wrong with it, but I would absolutely recommend going out to strike lines. There's usually like free food, free drinks, free snacks. I got to hang out with a baby cow. One of the animal wranglers bought one out to a solidarity event. It was like the best time of my life. Yeah, I was like super surprised by that. I did not show up for that, but I was incredibly excited. So yeah, I would definitely recommend going out to a strike line. They're super fun. It's fun to be in solidarity with people that have a common struggle with, and it's also there's food, there's drinks. Yeah, couldn't recommend it more highly.
So for people like me living in Indiana, what's a way that I myself can get involved by being so far away from, the studios and things like that?
It's harder to donate your time when there's an entire country between you. But if you find that you are not financially impacted by the strike, there are several different organizations where you can lend some bucks to. You can donate to the ECF, the Entertainment Community Fund. ECF doles out money to writers and actors, of course, but also IATSE members, DGA members, like almost any organized labor. There's also a mutual aid organization that started up called, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on it. It's like the Green Envelope. And green envelopes are residual checks that writers get. And so they started it as writers so that they could dole out grocery money to anybody in the industry. You don't even have to be union because it's impacting people that are outside of unions as well. And so I know it's very difficult, almost impossible to donate your time, but there is ways to donate your money. Also to stay in connection with what the unions are asking. Like the unions are not currently asking that anybody cut their streaming services. I'm huge into organized labor. I still haven't cut any of mine. If they do ask for that, that might be something. But yeah, there's the ECF and the green envelopes. I can send you in an email so that we could link it to this if people are interested. But if you're not in the LA area, the Atlanta area, or the New York area where there are big picket lines going on, that's always a great way to jump in.
And also your local food bank donations as well go a long way, because as you mentioned, the effects like ripple throughout portions of the industry that we don't even see or maybe don't even think of. Obviously myself included. So I think they've noted that demand has gone up. And so I think making sure that we can take care of everybody as best as we can is also a good we should definitely do that. And the Food Bank of Los Angeles is another great organization.
So each of you are in kind of different aspects of the industry. How has the strike affected what you do so far?
Yeah, I'll take the reality side, the reality TV side. So now me personally, I work mainly in reality. I've done a little bit of scripted, but my main bread and butter is reality. And as a reality producer, I don't have a I don't have a guild. I don't have anything like that to join, unfortunately. So what has happened is that in the past, I think it was 2008 was the last big strike. There was a huge reality TV boom, and it gave rise to a lot of shows, and that had its own. It was it had its own repercussions. Now this time we're not seeing that. What's interestingly enough, and I think you've seen this with streaming shows and stuff like that too, is the companies, they knew this was going to happen, right? So they've been planning this for a while, and they started putting shows, especially reality, which could be made cheaply and quickly. They put a lot in the can, so they've got a lot to sit on, or enough to sit on, so that they figured that they could wait it out. So right now what I'm seeing is that usually, even in a down year, this is even farther down than a down year in reality. So there's a lot of shows. I mean, Survivor's coming out, but they shot that 2 years ago. It's been shot way in the past, and there's just a lot of editing going on. And even now there's stuff, there's not enough stuff to edit right now. So all of a sudden I'm hearing from editors that are out of work. They're usually working all the time. So even in reality, which you wouldn't think that it would be affected. It wasn't affected in the past. In fact, it just flourished. Well, now it's hurting as well, just because they knew this was going to happen. They planned for it, and it's pretty nefarious. It's awful. So
I'm legitimately shocked by that, Scott.
No,
I really
truth,
thought that
man.
you were going to be like, I'm having my life, work's coming in left and right. I get to hire all of my favorite people because the whole town. That's legitimately shocking. I would not have expected.
A lot of good people.
I was surprised by that too.
No, it's the truth, man. And it's I've seen it. Wow. There's only a few shows right now that are even cutting right now. And even there's only a few shows, that shiny floor shows, that are shooting right now. And because a lot of the hosts are SAG, so you can't shoot some of these shows if you have a SAG actor as your host.
That totally makes sense, because in the 2008 strike, it was just WGA. It was not WGA and SAG. I would not have thought of that at all.
This added a whole other layer to it. So now you have shows without hosts. And that's why the last show that I was working on, and actually my last day was Friday, yesterday. So now I'm a free agent for now. But it was basically an ABC news show. And the only reason that they could, shoot is because they weren't using SAG actors. They were using locals. They were going to locals, and they were in West Virginia, Texas, and they were using local actors, small time actors. And then the host, he's not SAG, he's a newscaster. So, technically he's a news guy. So it's these shows, there's some that are still filming and still shooting, but it's not like it was. And I know for 100%, I know very well about American Ninja Warrior. All of a sudden they switched to the 2-year model. So they already have another season in the can. They're cutting it right now. They're not filming next year. So there's a lot of these shows, Top Chef, Master Chef, that have filmed seasons in advance, and they're just cutting them right now. So there's some that are still, shooting right now, but it's a small amount. And it's kind of, you can see the pre-planning from the studios. They knew this was going to happen. They knew this is going to happen this time, is going to be a big deal. And so they planned ahead. And that's why you hear that's why some of that stuff, the quotes that are coming out from the heads of the studios, it's so nefarious. It's so bad. Where they're oh, we're going to wait out until people lose their jobs, because they know that they have enough content to get them to at least next year, right? They can get to next year, but the spring is going to be a little thin. But then also you're seeing that they're delaying some movies. There's a couple high profile movies that are being delayed further down the line, because they're trying to spread it out. And they've got some stuff on the shelf that would never come out, but they're going to put it out. So, yeah, that's what's going on in reality.
On the finishing and post side of things, I still think we're on a bit of a delay. So, because color and finish just happens at the very, very end of the process. So, I know that colorists at large have felt a little bit of a squeeze, particularly those that work in narrative and might be affected by, SAG and whatnot. But for me, I work in mainly commercial. I have this weird split of commercial marketing and then like indie doc, if that makes sense. So luckily things have been pretty busy still for me and for my team. But yeah, it has been like an influx of a lot of on the positive note, a lot of people who have like little personal projects or short films, those have flourished. So it's been a great time to explore a little extra creativity with some friends and see some concepts kind of fleshed out, and some people even making kind of proof of concepts, so that way they can, when it's it's able to be for pitching and able to be done, they can kind of hit the ground running. So that's been a lot of fun to explore that with some friends and collaborators.
I'm also shocked that on post you guys aren't feeling it as much. I kind of thought you guys would have been down for the count as well. Shocking. I'm glad you guys are, yeah. So I do lighting production. So we're the boots on the ground. Pre-production's done. We don't have anything to do in post. So it's just the boots on the ground portion of it. I would say I am kind of one of the lucky ones where I mainly do music videos and commercials. Commercials are on a separate contract. So when the WGA was on strike, you could still have a SAG actor do a commercial, as long as it was already written beforehand, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say my workload got cut in about half. But for me, that's usually not a problem. Usually I'm like overwhelmed with work. I can like send out some of my work to newer people in my position or peers, colleagues, whatever. I can usually send out. I usually have more on my plate than I'm willing to go for. I would say it really got rough for me when SAG joined in, because at that point it's only music videos in town that are shooting, and some reality, like Scott said. But it was that was a bigger drop for me. So I would say my workload's been cut down to about 10% of what it was before the strikes. And like Scott mentioned earlier, the studios knew this was coming. They knew that they had a couple of bones to pick, and that they were not willing to give the writers and then subsequently the actors what they were going to ask for. And they knew about this. So I even heard from a lot of my friends that January through April and May, until the strike happened, were super slow. I luckily had... Everybody has a slow January in Los Angeles. I always feel like production side of things, it's just like everybody's got to get the pre-production done. Nobody works over December for the most part. I digress. January through April was slow for a lot of people because they wanted everybody to already be starting to dip into savings by the time May rolls around. So that instead of solidarity, you've got IATSE members who are like, hey, I'm going to lose my house. I need you guys to sign a deal. And so, I definitely think there was a concentrated effort to make sure that this was as difficult as possible, unfortunately, for a lot of, honestly, like January through February or January through April was so slow for so many people that it made, when May hit, it was like, oh God. Like I said, I was one of the luckier ones that I already work in commercials and music videos. So when SAG was on strike, there are less commercials and music videos, and people that have got like 10 years experience on me are usually snatching those up at this point. But yeah, it's definitely had an incredibly significant impact from when WGA jumped in, and then an even more significant impact when SAG-AFTRA joined the strike line as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the music video side of things, because I thought that there was like a hiatus on music video work there for a minute. That wasn't the case?
I didn't notice any. No, I worked on the new SZA music video that just came out. Cool. I'm trying to think of like we did the Ice Spice Nicki Minaj music video that was during the strike. I haven't noticed any slowdown. I think the only way that you could get in trouble with that is like a Taylor Swift music video, because Taylor holds a SAG card. So if any of your musicians are also actors, I think then you could get in trouble with it. But even then, like, you'd have to ask somebody who knows a little bit more about the SAG-AFTRA side of things than I do. I typically don't know very much about their workflow. Mm-hmm. I would think if it's a Taylor Swift music video, though, she's not acting in the capacity of a SAG-AFTRA actor. She's acting in the capacity of a musician. But That's thin hairs for me. All of the music videos that I have been on, none of the talent have been SAG-AFTRA. So I didn't notice any slowdown in music videos or commercials until SAG-AFTRA joined in terms of commercials.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that distinction existed, and I feel like that makes her self-released film that's coming out, I think later this fall, or maybe I don't know exactly when. That's even more interesting. And
that one I think. Oh, sorry. That one I think they're going to have less of an issue with because it's just concert footage. Like there's no acting involved in it. From what little I know, my wife's the big Swiftie, so I don't know as much about Taylor's career and how it's going. But from what I've understood, that's documentary, and so it'd be a separate contract. And then because she's not like acting per se, I think they're going to be okay with that one.
Well, I know that SAG-AFTRA kind of has these passes that they'll give different companies that they get along with, or
the waivers.
Yes, the waivers if a company follows what they're asking for. So could Alex, it seems like you kind of know what I'm talking about. So could you go into detail about what those kind of things are and how those make it okay for you to do this, but it's not okay for, say, Netflix to do something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know of A24, everyone's favorite independent movie company these days, are still making movies, and they are not crossing picket lines. They are not invalidating themselves. And so what smaller companies like A24, don't quote me on this one, I think Blumhouse is also doing a couple of movies. There are like these smaller, more independent, not studio-based movies. Sometimes the studios buy their movies, but they don't start studio picture films that are getting what's called a waiver. And a waiver essentially says, here are all of the things that you are asking for at the negotiations table. We're in. We don't think that's a problem. We think that's great. We think you guys deserve streaming residuals. We think you guys deserve not to have AI in the workplace. And we think you guys deserve minimum writers' rooms. And so we will abide by all of those things that you're asking at the bargaining table. And now you guys can make your movies. I've heard that there is a bit of a disagreement about whether some members of SAG and some members of WGA think that we should be doing this, because it does technically kind of hurt the strike effort. You know, I mean, I think nobody should be making movies at this time. Nobody should be making television at this time. But if you're willing to sign a waiver, you can get these things. So I know that there's mixed feelings. I know that some members are for the waivers because it gets, you know, people like me, IATSE members, back onto the workplace, which is important. There are a lot of us that are really hurting. So it's kind of like a, you know, you could ask 10 members and you're going to get 10 different opinions on whether the waivers are good or valid, but that's how the waiver process works.
Well, and the other side of that too is that one good thing about it is that it just proves that a small studio like A24, like they can say yes to this stuff and it doesn't hurt them. You know, it's proof that it's not a big deal.
100%.
Yeah, but I hear you. Like it does, like it goes back and forth. But I think that's one side of it, is that like if A24 can do it, why can't Warner Brothers?
Yeah, exactly. If this small company that does like $5 to $10 million movies can afford what the writers and the actors are asking for,
exactly,
how come these studios that crank out $100 million mega movies can't afford it? Right.
Well, and that's, we kind of talked about this earlier, but and I think you mentioned it, that it's not about money. It does not feel like at this point, it does not feel like this is about money. It's about power. It's about power over people and power over, you know, the workforce. Because if it was about money, this would have been settled a long time ago, because they have the money. If A24 has the money, then Warner Bros. Does.
Right. So what happens if, say, someone who, you know, is tired of not working goes ahead and joins a shoot that's going on and kind of crosses this picket line? What kind of repercussions could this have for them, not only currently, but after the strike is over, after a new deal is done and things are moving again?
Guy, you're grinning. Do you want it or you want me to do it?
We take them out in the middle of the street and we throw tomatoes at them. That's what we do. They're publicly shamed, tarred and feathered.
Version of it. Yeah.
Public shaming.
Yeah, no, there's a ton of societal pressure, like you mentioned, but also Historically, when we've seen workers crossing the line and working on struck content, what often happens is that there's not an official blacklist, but those names are written down and those names are remembered and then those names are recalled. And that, maybe right now you're a young, hungry, non-union filmmaker who's tired of not working on things, and the Drew Barrymore show is looking, that did resolve
Bill
itself.
Maher.
Let's say this is a week ago, and the Drew Barrymore show is looking for a lighting console programmer. And let's say I take that job and I'm not a union member, or I am a union member and I'm just willing to cross the picket line to work on struck content. If you're not a union member, your name's written down. You will essentially be unallowed to join labor unions. We've seen this happen historically. Like a few years back, we had Sharknado that continued to film in Los Angeles when they were asked not to by the unions because they fired several people for trying to work and organize labor. So the director of photography, the DP that came in, crossed the picket line and worked on struck content, was never allowed to join Local 600. They did make advancements in their career. They probably could have joined Local 600, which is the camera union here and internationally. And it's definitely stalled out their career. So if anybody's watching this and thinking, this would be a good opportunity to get my foot in the door, the better opportunity to get your foot in the door is if you are ever asked to work on struck content, to cross a picket line, contact your local labor union that you're interested in, take the job, and then don't show up for it. You can send your call sheet into the call steward to the labor union that you're interested in joining. And now, instead of being on a list of people not to admit to a labor union, you're on a list of when the town gets busy, you might just get a phone call. You might get those permit days that you're after.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, you've seen it with you mentioned Drew Barrymore and then Bill Maher. Like they were saying they were going to come back, and they say that no, all press is good press. Well, they did a U-turn real quick when they heard that would have been a huge deal if they would have crossed that line, and then there would have been a ton of people that wouldn't work for them ever again. And then all of a sudden, in the future, they're just hurting themselves in the future. So it's overall, right now, this is a huge time for organized labor in America. It's, with the UAW, with, SAG-AF, the strikes here in the movie industry. And there's going to be plenty of people that are trying to do the opposite. They're trying to bust up the unions. They're trying to get rid of them. So right now it's a good time to stick with the unions if you believe in that type of thing, because they're actually fighting for the people. They're actually fighting for the people that do the work. And right now is the time to not cross the picket lines and to just show your solidarity, and maybe all together we can get a rise of labor in America, in other places in the world.
So the longest strike so far ran from March 7th to August 7th in 1988. That was the longest writer strike that we've had. This strike today is on day 145. If you had to guess or think about how long you think this might continue to go on for, how much longer do you think this could go on for? Not a better way to put it.
Well, Sorry. It's funny how you're asking, because they're negotiating today. So who's to know? If this comes out 2 days from now, it might be outdated. But from what and maybe Alex and Dan probably you've heard from your sources, and Alex, maybe you have the best view. But from what I've heard, if there isn't a deal made in October, then we're going to next year. Basically, we're going to February, March. That's what I'm hearing.
I'm hearing similar, where things could either go well this week and we might just wrap up the writer's strike this week, the following week, or like you said, they're just going to write off the whole fourth quarter, and they'll start talks up in January, and we'll see where we're going from there. I know that I'm on my health insurance is through MPI, Motion Picture Insurance, and they've kind of done a big blanket extension. I'm really simplifying things here because I don't fully fathom them, but I think more members are going to start losing their health insurance in February and March. A lot of IATSE members have families, and that's super important to them. So I'm really hoping that it can get wrapped up before then. But I'm hearing the same things that you're hearing, that the talks these weeks are hopeful. It does seem like for the first time since this whole thing started that the studios are getting serious about making a deal that works for everybody. Because we went 100 days without a counter offer, which I think is criminal. I mean, it's not good faith bargaining. If the NLRB was as strong as it should be, we would have had more pressure on them by now. But yeah, I think if these talks don't go well, we may still be doing this into the very earliest of 2024. But we're all just kind of shaking the magic 8-ball and taking guesses at it, essentially.
So other than insurance, what are some long-lasting effects you guys see coming from the length of this strike or the outcome of this strike? Like, what are some changes or some effects that you can see coming down the pipeline from this?
Well, I'm personally wondering, it's just going to be a gangbusters return. I'm wondering if that's going to be the case. I feel like we're all going to have a very hard time acclimating to everybody trying to catch back up, get through like a backlog of shows that they need to either resume, kickstart, and it's going to be hopefully a real gangbusters opportunity for everyone who's been out of work to really level up. Because in my field, I felt like some of the productions that I might be able to reach to get, maybe in terms of like either budget or kind of profile or whatever, I felt those kind of leave my field as the bigger studios and agencies have been scrambling for work. So I felt kind of like the top most quality of my work kind of go down a little bit as everyone's been scrambling. So I'm hoping that can reverse the tide a little bit, and then there's a little bit better material to come through. Not that I don't love my current client list or anything like that, but I'm hoping that it's going to be a very competitive 2024.
Competitive, trying to drink water through a fire hose all at once, right? With everything just kind of shooting through all at once.
Yeah, totally.
We can certainly hope. That's what I'm hoping for as well. I think we're going to have a bit of a scenario like when we were permitted to go back to work after our lapse in COVID. I think that was when, the town was as busy as, I wouldn't take my word for it. I've only been here for 6 or 7 years, but I was hearing the old timers tell me that it was the busiest they ever saw the town. And so I do think there's going to be, like, if somebody kinked that water hose that you were talking about, I think the kink is going to last a little longer because we have to send the writers back to their new hopefully writer minimum rooms where they're but I do think we are going to have the writers back in their writers room to do this. But what I was actually talking to my wife about this last night, what I'm hoping happens is that the writers strike is resolved soon. We take another month or so, the SAG-AFTRA strike is resolved soon. And then hopefully by the time the writers have gotten back into their rooms and started writing things again, that 2024 is just an onslaught of production across all departments is what we're all hoping for.
Yeah, I'm going to be more pessimistic. Like, I really do feel like, because like, speaking of COVID, because everybody went down for a little bit. And then, then it was popping. It was like on fire. And it's all because everybody was stuck inside. There was this huge demand all of a sudden. People were just chugging through, like the metrics were nuts, right? So on the studio side, on the Netflix side, they're just like, oh, people are just going through this stuff like gangbusters. So we got to fill the demand. So I don't think the demand I actually feel like the normies, the normal people out there haven't felt the squeeze, right? Like Stranger Things season 8 is still coming out or whatever, it's like, oh, like Loki season 2, like they have this stuff in the can. Like the people out there are not jonesing for, they're not, they're not craving it. Like they haven't felt the squeeze like the workers have. So I'm not sure if the demand is going to go up like we think it's going to go. I think it might be, in my opinion, it might be a slow restart. But who knows? Who's to know?
I've heard a lot of deals that were handed out before the strikes and everything happened, have a lot of them have been revoked and, cut ties. And, oh, Netflix had this overall deal with, say person X. And now that this is going on, we're getting rid of all of that. Do you see a lot of these bigger industries kind of re-upping and trying to go back to those people and re-sign them to contracts? Or do you think this is everybody except for, kind of higher up people kind of start at the same level, and it kind of opens up opportunity, like Dan was saying, for other people to kind of get their foot in the door of, hey, this person isn't as high profile as this person over here, so let's give them a chance. It won't cost us as much.
Yeah, I mean, that's already happening, kind of. I don't know. Like, here's a great example, or maybe it's just a recent example, is that movie Talk to Me. Have you guys seen that? It's fantastic, by the way. Yep. But it was made by two Australian twin brother YouTubers.
Yep.
So they had they had this longtime YouTube channel. They were doing like Jackass style stuff, like stupid stunts. And then through like some serendipity, like they had this script, they showed that they could film, and then they went off, they did their own independent thing. And all of a sudden they have this huge hit on their hands. And now they ordered 2 more of them, or at least 1 more. I know they're in production for the second one right now. So it's like, but then on the other side, like with these deals, like the Christopher Nolans of the world, the David Finchers, the top guys are always, I feel like, going to get, called first, like, because they are the guys. Like if you see Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, like you're going to go, there's just some people that command more respect. But as Alex had said previous, like with A24, with some of these indie studios, hopefully we're seeing the bigger studios lose some power. The indie studios come up. Hopefully we have more of a 90s where you see, $10 million, $20 million mid-budget movies, but they're really well made. And hopefully we see a rise of those. And with that, you get a rise of filmmakers. That's just hopeful, though. I mean, who's to know if it will happen? But yeah, that's been needing to happen for a while. Like the Marvelization, the Disneyification, the Star Warsification of these movies, it's gotten bad too already. Like people, already we're feeling that, like the fatigue, the superhero fatigue, like it's the same thing over and over again. So this already needed to happen. So hopefully creatively we'll see this switch. And then hopefully with these strikes and with how the future holds, hopefully, we see more independent, smaller stuff come up.
Dan, do you kind of see other people on your side of the industry, the more non-union, but getting these, bigger projects, trying to either join unions or start up unions that don't exist yet because of a strike like this and because of wages and how things are going? Not to bring up another big movie, but Dune 2, trying to replace a studio of 10,000 post people because they don't want to pay them money. Do you see something like that kind of opening more post side of eyes and kind of moving more people towards the union?
Yeah, I would say probably the VFX artists of the world are the ones leading that charge, just because they are so much more plentiful and they do have so much more leverage, I would say. So I'm hoping that I'm interested to see how that pans out, because they desperately need some sort of representation or some sort of pushback to get, again, like regular working hours, fair labor deals, and honestly just to create a more sustainable ecosystem around that. Because it's almost with every big movie that's relies heavily on visual effects, those studios often fold afterwards. You have like that famous example of Rhythm and Hues, the one that did I think it was Life of Pi. They announced the day that like Life of Pi like won the Academy Award that like they went out of business. And so it's like, at what point it just seems like we've got to return back to some sort of like normalcy where if you are successful, like, you share in those profits and everything. So I'm hoping that with VFX animators and workers gaining some sort of solidarity, that can kind of ripple down into some of your more freelance-based post-production people. In the colorist world, there's been like a slight push for for some sort of academy or some sort of recognition or some sort of union. And it just doesn't really go like that far because people don't really know where colorists lie. It's like, are you part of the camera department or are you part of the post department? Because you kind of live like you're strongly in both worlds, because you'd want to include DITs in that as well. And also, I'd say the like color grading and finishing is a much more lucrative and much more smaller aspect of the industry, and so it's a lot harder, I would say, to get that desire to unionize. If that was an option, and I think you can join MPEG as a colorist, if there was more of a push to that, I would definitely be open to it. But yeah, until you can, there's just not much solidarity going on there between, so many small shops and your freelancers. So like I said, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the VFX community shakes that up.
I'm surprised that you guys aren't within Local 700, the editors union territory. I know it's not traditional editing, but like Local 80 is everything from paramedics to grips to crafty. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to, we don't all have to do the same one job to be in the same union. So I'm kind of surprised that Local 700 hasn't scooped y'all up yet. But
yeah, I mean, I am too. It'd be, it would be great to be a part of that. But yeah, I think you're like your top dogs, at Company 3, the Mill, that kind of thing. I think they're just too busy making, $1,000 an hour to really want to entertain that. I'm obviously nowhere near that kind of level, but until you can get people like them on board, you're gonna have a really hard time getting that. So there's very few positions, I think, in the industry where you can command that kind of rate. And so yeah, I'm hoping that maybe from the bottom up, maybe like a colorist at my level would be able to do that and then kind of change those tides, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
It's
sadly.
The exact same thing with reality producers, and that like there's just people at the top that are making so much money. Like there's been pushes over the years to try and unionize, producers. But like the guys up top, they're making, $1,000 a minute. They don't want to limit what they can make. And that's always been the argument to be a producer, like over being an editor, at least from, friends of mine over the years, where it's like, well, as a producer, there's no ceiling. Well, it's like, yeah, well, the floor is pretty low too. So I don't know.
The floor is dirt.
Yeah, the floor is dirt. So it's like, there's been pushes in different areas to try and unionize, but there's also pushback, and yeah, it's tough to navigate.
What do you think the bigger studios and the AMPTP, kind of just to wrap this up a little bit, what do you think, if anything, they will learn from a strike that's lasted as long as this one has?
I think it's going to depend on the deal that's made. I think if WGA members, WGA organizing committee takes a deal that's not great, if the members ratify it, I think it signifies to the studios, all we have to do is wait them out 100, 145, 200 days. I think if the writers and subsequently the actors are victorious, however, I think it's going to show the AMPTP that workers are tired of getting stepped on, that we're ready to band together collectively. Even like, all of us here in the chat that are not directly impacted by the negotiations, but, that we're willing to like go out to strike lines, that we're willing to like not cross picket lines. I think the working class is much more organized than the AMPTP was ready for. I don't think they expected to see IATSE members on the picket line. I don't think they expected to see new mutual aid organizations and charities forming during this. I thought, to me, I'm estimating that somebody in an office said, these people don't have 6 months savings and they're going to start clawing at each other at that point. All we have to do is wait them out. And I think that they're probably more than likely surprised by what they've seen thus far. And so I think if WGA, subsequently SAG, can come home with big deals, I think it shows them that we're stronger together than they anticipated.
think we're also going to see like potentially a paradigm shift if they can get the streaming data on these shows, because
Yeah, it's huge.
I think there's some skepticism or some doubt over how successful these platforms actually are, because it's just like such a huge and enormous cost to develop, 6 or 7 streaming platforms, as opposed to a more centralized like cable-based system, or I guess linear is what you would call it. So that to me is like what, obviously I want a deal and everything that's fair to everybody, but that's what I'm probably most interested in seeing shift, is just seeing like, okay, is this streaming model actually doable and usable? Because you see like year after year, like the prices of these subscriptions go up and up, and so, at what point what are we going to reach that breaking point of the price just not being worth it? And then seeing the actual published figures on viewership, I think is going to be very, very telling.
Perfect. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, to mirror what Alex said, I mean, it's really going to depend on, the outcome of this, like what the deal is. But historically, the pessimistic view, maybe the realistic view, is that they're just going to learn how to prepare better for the next one. And that's what happened last time. We've seen it. Like, it happened in 2008. It happened, in the 80s, and that they've just dug their heels in more and more every time this comes up. So it's going to come up again. They'll make a deal. There'll be a certain amount of years, and then it'll come up again. So it's like, hopefully they learn better than that. Hopefully the deal's better than that. But the other side of it is they just might learn how to dig their heels in more. Who knows?
Well, perfect. Well, guys, I appreciate you joining in on this with us and giving your thoughts about the strike that's going on. And we want to thank everybody that tunes in and watches this and kind of gets, probably a new perspective on what's going on. So thank you to Scott, Dan, and Alex for taking the time out, spending some time with us, and kind of filling us in with what's going on. It's really nice to read it over a computer screen, but hearing it and discussing it is completely another thing. And we really appreciate you guys' time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Nathan, for your great job moderating.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for rounding us all up together. We have a lot of time on our hands. So thanks for giving us somewhere to usefully put our time on our hands.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good rest of the night, okay?
Take it easy.
See you later.
Right. Bye.